perception as a skill is kind of weird. By perception, I don't just mean like the actual skill listed as perception on your character sheet. I mean any skill that is it's specifically designed to be like, do you notice something? The perceptive abilities skills, or whatever number or mechanic or statistic is associated with that in your particular game. In D&D, they have perception for like, do you notice things around you? They have insight for, can you read this person or situation? And they have investigation, which is, can you find the thing that you are looking for? It is 3 different skills for, do you gain the information that you as a player want to gain? That's fine. It doesn't, I don't say that in a dismissive way, because that is certainly a legitimate way to approach things. It is interesting that 2 of those are based on wisdom and 1 is based on intelligence. Feels like having 2 different stats for do you notice the thing that are both based on wisdom is a little redundant. I would argue that there doesn't need to be both perception and insight. But more to the point, I think it's an interesting idea or an interesting approach that D&D takes to have these skills and these numbers, which function. They actually kind of pull double duty. First, they are: do you notice the thing? Are you going to get the information that you are looking for? This can enter in if you're doing any kind of investigation. There's an investigation skill, but what I'm referring to specifically is like, the murder mystery, which is a thing that crops up in D&D quite a bit. Or if you're looking for clues in an area about like a character's motivations or information about what they're doing. Anytime you're trying to gain information, you would roll one of these stats, probably investigation or perception. Yes. And then, if you roll well enough, you get the information and you can move on. A lot of times, this, unfortunately, is framed as, do you get the information or do you keep trying to get the information? Because you can't really move on without it. That is, I think, a tricky place for a D&D campaign to be. And I think skilled DMs know to avoid that kind of situation. But the other thing that these skills do is, do you catch the hostile action? If an enemy turns invisible and is trying to sneak around, you're going to be using your perception, probably your passive perception, to see if they are able to sneak successfully, and then you don't know where they are. So that is someone who is actively doing something and seeing if they can get through you. Now, I'm all for stats that do multiple things. I think that's, frankly, an elegant design. If you can have one statistic or one mechanic that covers multiple different scenarios, that's good. So I'm not saying that having perception be both, do you get the information, and also can you spot the stealthing enemy, is necessarily a bad thing. What I am saying is that it is a different approach than most RPGs take. Well, I don't know about most RPGs. It's a different approach than you could take in an RPG. Because things like Powered by the Apocalypse are going to be using their information gathering skills to get, I was about to say to get information, which is just like fully a redundant sentence and does not need to be stated. But the way that they approach it is like, you have things like investigating a mystery, or reading a situation, that kind of thing. And what they usually do is they have a list of questions that you can ask, and then based on your role, you get to ask a certain number of those questions. And then there might be special abilities that expand the list or give you additional specific information, or that allow you to ask any question you want. and that's an interesting difference in the approach between the games. Because like in D&D, if you are investigating around a room, you're going to be like, okay, I'm looking for the wizard's journal to see if I can tell what he's been up to. So I'm gonna search for the wizard's journal, and the DM would be like, all right, make a investigation or make a perception or whatever it is. There's a lot of overlap between those skills. And then you roll, and based on what specific information you're trying to find out and how you're trying to find it out, that will determine the difficulty of the roll. You know, maybe the wizard's journal is hidden, so it's a DC 30 to find the journal. Maybe the journal's in code, and so then there's going to be another roll to see if you can decode the journal and actually get the information that you want out of it. You know, you have to like really take into consideration the specific situation that you're in and how you are trying to find out the information. Whereas in a more yeah, exactly. Whereas in a more rules light situation, let me soothe my throat here with some sweet Mountain Dew. In a more rules light scenario, particularly in Powered by the Apocalypse, I am doing this kind of an approach for Legends and Lore. You would say, I want to investigate the room, see what I can find. And the GM would be like, okay, well, roll a, whatever the gather information roll is. And you'd make your roll, and then based on the results of the roll, you would be able to ask questions and say, I want to ask, what are they up to? Maybe that's one of the questions on the list. What are they up to? And so at that point, you could say, all right, you find the journal, and in the journal, you find this information that you've been looking for. And so it's sort of like almost an exactly opposite approach, where you want you're investigating, and like based on the role, you find the information, and then you explain how you found the information. Whereas in D&D, you have to explain how you are looking for the information, and then that determines what you need to roll to find that information. It's like exactly opposite. And that's why there is the difference between what we call narrative first games and mechanics first games. And I clearly prefer the latter. I prefer the narrative first approach. I prefer the mechanics to really support the idea that like the narrative wants to move forward. The narrative really wants to move forward. And so the mechanics are there to support that and make that the most likely outcome. Because if the narrative doesn't move forward, there's a very real possibility that the players just kind of become uninvested in the situation. If I'm sitting here for 20, 30 minutes and we're just like spinning our tires and we're not making the good rolls and not getting the information that we need, well, it's like eventually we're going to run out of ideas and just kind of have to give up and leave. And that's not a very satisfying outcome for any situation. Whereas in the lighter systems, in your Blades in the Darks, your Powered by the Apocalypse, those kinds of things, there tends to be this mechanical push toward the action evolving and developing over time. Maybe you only have time for one check before like the bad guys arrive, that's not usually a thing in D&D unless like you are explicitly being pursued, whereas if you are rolling to see like what kind of information you are able to get, as opposed to rolling to see if you get the information that you want, there's a sort of sense that like the game is forging the narrative rather than the GM having forged a narrative and then is slotting it in as you go. And it's a much more free form way. It's much more, frankly, the really honestly, the word that I would use to describe it is organic. It's a much more organic way to construct a story with other players. If you are writing a story, like in a book, you can determine all of these specific obstacles that the characters have to overcome. You can determine all of the precautions that the bad guys have set up. You know, you can go through all of that and make it quite detailed ahead of time, because you have the luxury of, you know, knowing exactly where everyone's going to be and what everyone's going to do. When you're dealing with other players, you don't know what they're going to do. And so the game, I think, should be better at accommodating. Man, this cold is like, I had it a week ago and it's still like kind of messing up my throat. So anyways, the game should really support players' ability to like come up with, both the players and the GM should be able to come up with like ways that information can be gained, because there's a lot of information out there. And the role, I'm fully on board with there being like a role for seeing, you know, do we get the information? But there tends to be this thing in D&D where like you either get the information you are looking for or you don't. And there's like the list of, here's what's obvious, here's what's easy to get, here's what's hard to get. Whereas, like, I don't know that I like that approach at all, because it doesn't leave much room for the storytelling. And I know that feels like a bit of a hardline opinion, and I don't know that, like, that's not an opinion I have developed very, very much. So, like, I could probably be argued against that. But what I am saying is that it feels better to roll and then get a bunch of information and then just move on with the story. Either, you know, like the bad guys come, or that's all the information that's available in the scene. You know, the narrative is established by the roll. Somebody with bass is popping through here, and like they want everyone to know that they have bass. So if you heard rumbling, that's why. And now I'm out of drink. So, anyways, I just had these little thoughts on like the different approaches for perceptive skills, you know, and this can go for both like searching for information in an area and for like reading somebody, you know, somebody who may be a little bit shady. This can apply to both of those situations. And that leaves, like, having that handled separately in that way, that leaves open this thing where, like, you know, bad guys are going to be sneaky and stealthy. How do you combat that? And in those contexts, those kinds of systems, they're going to handle sneaky enemies very differently, on account of a certain lack of verisimilitude. D&D likes their verisimilitude, where bad guys and good guys both operate under the same rules. You know, they're going to be making their attack rolls same as the bad guys, or same as the PCs. They're going to be making stealth checks same as the PCs would in the same situation. Whereas in a game like what I am describing, bad guys usually don't do things the same way as the PCs. Like the whole system is framed around the idea that the player characters are the stars of the show. They are going to be interacting with the world, and the world does not interact with them in the same way. So anyways, maybe I should do a video on that, on the benefits and the drawbacks of having verisimilitude in your RPGs. That could be a good video idea. But for now, perception can be handled different ways. And I wonder, actually, if D&D wouldn't benefit from having a different approach to perception. I wonder if one of these Powered by the Apocalypse style systems of gathering information could really be imported almost just exactly as is. I wonder if that could work. I might put some thought into that. All right. See ya.